All right. It is 4 minutes past the hour. This is a good time for us to get started. So again, thank you all for being here. And today we will be talking with you about what happens after DBE recertification. So this is this is one in a series of webinars that many of you may have previously attended. So some of this will be a bit of a review. Then we're going to be talking about what comes after reevaluation. You see, there's these multiple finish lines here. That's sort of how we're conceptualizing of this. And then we will talk a bit about a case study in Michigan DOT. Then we'll go over the recommendations for analyzing overall DBE goals and some for fine-tuning SBE programs. And then we will get into a Q&A period. We're really interested in hearing your feedback. So I am Dr. Nicole Yates. I will be moderating the Q&A session and here to present to you on what happens after DBE recertification. We have Dave Keene and Mara Rosales. Dave Keene is the founding principal of Keene Independent. He has been a leader in the DBE program field for nearly 40 years. He has successfully defended these programs in court. Throughout his career, he's worked with state DOTs, transit agencies, airports, and following the IR ruling, he ran a pilot program developing personal narratives for DBEs with Arizona DOT. And in his work, he's interviewed tens of thousands of representatives from DBEs. Then we have Mara Rosales, managing partner of Rosales Law Partners. Prior to entering private practice, Mara was the general counsel for the San Francisco International Airport. Her work has included development and defense of business contracting programs and extensive representation of DBEs. And she and Dave are frequent collaborators. So as I mentioned, we will get through this PowerPoint. We've got some information to share with you all, some things to review, and a case study to go over. And after we've done all that, then we will get to a Q&A period. Really are hoping to spend most of our time there. So a couple of considerations for this. First of all, just note that this session is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube afterwards. And so if you are making any comments or asking any questions, we will anonymize all of those if you choose to include any identifying information in your comments. So there's a Q&A feature at the that should be at the bottom of your screen there, where you can submit a question or a comment, and I will read that out loud and then remove any identifying information if that is included. So we will come back to this towards the end, but just so you all know, as you are viewing the presentation, thinking about your questions and comments, you could put those in that Q&A feature there. Okay, so let me hand this over to Dave.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us again. I'm going to go back 2 slides because we want to admire our finish lines. The first finish line is each state and the certifiers in a state are having a group run, and you finish the finish line when every certifier in that state, as the UCP, is able to complete not only accepting all of these DBE certifications, but evaluating those and then making a final determination of who is a DBE under the new rules and who is not, and then informing USDOT of that. So think of a large run, and you're running this as a team, and you officially cross the finish line when you all cross the finish line from your state. The finish line number 2 is now we break into individual runners, and you as a recipient of USDOT funds, no matter whether that's FHWA, FTA, or FAA, are running towards finish line number 2. And that's, you can only start that run after your state has finished the first part of the race, and everybody's over the finish line number 1. You can start running towards finish line number 2 and cross that finish line when you have your new overall DBE goals and then you'll have the information necessary to complete your new DBE program plan. Only after that can you consider reinstating DBE contract goals if you need that. So that is our finish line analogy. Put yourself on that race and figure out where you are. We're going to show you a map of where we think you are on that race because almost everybody is still eyeing finish line number one. But that we're going to talk a lot about how to make the time between that finish line and finish lines 2 and 3 as short as possible because there's some things you can be doing now to help you get ready to run those parts of the race. Okay, so this is talking about the finish lines in a different type of graphic. So as soon as practicable, reevaluation of DBEs in your home state. You have the UCP has to inform USDOT when complete. And then as the second finish line, submitting a new overall DBE goal. DBE neutral projection. It's not just the goal, but it's the split between what's going to be DBE conscious and what's going to be DBE neutral. Finish line number 2, and then finish line number 3 is submitting the new DBE program plan. You might choose to make those submissions at the same time, the goal and the program plan, but there's some particular elements around consultation in your state that need to happen around the goal. And so you need to plan in time for that. And way over on the right is restarting DBE contract goals. You can't restart DBE contract goals if you need them until you have done everything to the left of that. So that's, we've told you that before, that's still the case. And this is a slide you've seen before. And here's another slide you've seen before, and I'll hand this to Mara Rosales.
So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. So this particular slide, those that have been part of this webinar in the past, this series have seen this before. Just as a refresher, the reevaluation of the certification of DBEs in your home state is required because of the changes brought about by the IFR, particularly with the definition of social disadvantage. As we've mentioned before, and hopefully everyone knows by now that the IFR revoked, amended the race and gender presumption that was embedded in the definition of social disadvantage in the DBE program. So now there's a need to reevaluate DBEs and focusing on disadvantage, social disadvantage, other than disadvantage based on race and gender. So that's why all certifiers have to go through this process. You start with the certification reevaluation in your home state. We've talked before that the DBEs and also the ACDBEs would need to demonstrate social disadvantage through a personal narrative and an updated personal net worth statement. So when that process is complete, the DOT has advised, as hopefully everyone knows, that you can set a guidepost, if you will, a deadline, a calendar time for the first wave of submissions for these requirements, so that the agency can do its evaluation in an efficient manner. And once that's done, you have completed your assessment, then you again certify those that qualify, decertify those that do not qualify for DBE certification under the IFR. You notify the USDOT, and then the IFR basically says that from that point you can turn to the interstate applications. As mentioned, all of these requirements, we've gone through them before. They also apply to the ACDBE program.
And when we were putting this PowerPoint together, we were careful not to use the word deadline. So every UCP entity has been using creative words that mean the same thing but don't say deadline. And so congratulations for that. Okay, so here's some new information, and we hope that this is pretty current. We may have we did this a couple weeks, or we finalized this a week or two ago, so there may be some changes in this. So our apologies if you're a red state and on the map, but you're actually a yellow in progress. So this describes those who have started and not started the reevaluation process. So, so think of the race not in terms of finish line, but as a starting line. Everybody in yellow is past the starting line. You're running the race because you are accepting applications. It may be that your guidepost for when applications needed to be in is now passed, and you're well into the the evaluation process. So who's gone over the first finish line in reevaluation? Our understanding is it's three states. It's Michigan, Illinois, and Oregon. Um, and we'll explain what the colors mean in a moment. But those are the three, and we can learn a bit from Michigan DOT anyway about what does it mean to then go on to cross finish lines 2 and 3, where with your overall DBE goals and your DBE program plan. Our understanding is Illinois DOT and perhaps others in Illinois are working on, or they're approaching finish line number 2, where they're developing their overall goals. Our understanding is in Oregon that is planned, but not the goal setting overall goal process is not yet started for most entities in Oregon, or maybe any entity in Oregon. But perhaps that'll be starting soon. And we have some clients in Oregon, and we've been in conversation with those folks. But our understanding is that's not been started. It's a different certifying agency than the direct recipients in Oregon. It's a different state agency. COVID that handles that in Oregon, and then individual recipients are now facing the need to get overall DBE goals developed, as well as ACDBE goals. Okay, so, and then some states just haven't started yet based on our current information. Florida is a bit of a unique case, as our understanding is many of the entities in Florida are well into the evaluation of recertification. Our understanding, at least from a couple of months ago, is Florida DOT was not participating in that, but that still is moving forward in Florida. So if you're from one of the states that we got this wrong, we're very interested in hearing from you. There's a lot of variation within the yellow. So here's the key to this is you could be just starting to accept applications, but you have not posted a closing date. Again, we're trying not to say deadline. I think Indiana and Ohio are examples of that. Or you have closing dates that are still out there a bit. I think Alabama, Massachusetts, North Dakota are examples of that. Congratulations, Idaho, North Carolina, Texas, and Utah. Based on our information, this is your closing date, or tomorrow is. So we should have put those states right at the finish line. And I hope we have representatives from those states today that can talk about that. We also know that these closing dates need to be taken, at least in the past, for many states, take them with a grain of salt, because they were extended. And we're going to talk about what Michigan DOT and the other certifiers in Michigan did, which was their initial deadline was extended. That seems to be very typical. We do have some states that their closing dates are past. So in theory, they would not be receiving new applications that they would need to evaluate as part of the reevaluation process. Arizona, California, New York, I think, are examples of that. Again, those folks can correct us if they're on the meeting today. So that's what the yellow means on the map. The yellow and green stripes are completed the reevaluation. Our understanding is they have notified USDOT of that. So we have 3 states that have crossed that first finish line and notified USDOT. And then the green is actually developing new DBE program, DBE goals, the overall goals, and DBE program plans. Michigan DOT, to our knowledge, there may be other entities in Michigan that have done this, but to our knowledge, it's just Michigan DOT that's done this. Perhaps there are some in Illinois that have done this as well that we don't know about yet. So we're hoping anybody who has more information can inform us in the Q&A part of our session. This is an information sharing session. And all this is hot off the press and could already be out of date.
We did get a comment that Missouri just passed that first finish line at the end of
Hey, Missouri!
last week. Yep.
That's
Yay.
great. Okay, so you've passed the first finish line. Now what? Which I think was the title of our webinar today. So, Mara, now what?
So yeah, so now we're facing, you've got the data, you have the certification reevaluation, you've now turning. This reminds me, this slide reminds me, in our conversation so far reminds me of a method as though you have never done a DBE program before. So you're kind of starting from scratch, but it's a restart. So you've got the information that you need. You're following the tools for assessing the availability and capacity of the folks that you've certified and their qualifications and those that are in the market. And so now you're ready to implement the methodology that you're familiar with, but under the new rules. And you are calculating your overall DBE goal, and then, obviously amending your existing DBE program and ready for submitting that. Again, we've covered these points in prior sessions. I think everyone knows them well. Certainly, we're open to questions on any specifics in particular. And the second bullet there is just a reminder that the deadlines, or the requirements, I should say, or the targets that are in the IFR in terms of dates are supplemental to any other applicable dates or requirements.
And for example, if your regular date for your refreshed, 3-year overall DBE goal is 2027, that's great. You still need to do this now. And the language in the IFR is as quickly as practicable. So that has some sense of urgency. So it doesn't matter if you have a 2027 date or even a 2028 date that you're up, or you just did this in 2025 and you probably didn't get any response when you submitted your overall DBE goals. Um, it's like that didn't matter, and you need to now do this under the new rules because the old DBE goal wouldn't matter because the definition of DBE has changed in the IFR and the way you would calculate that. The data, your data has changed. DBEs that you used to be able to count might no longer count, but there may be some potential DBEs that you would be able to count. So sorry you have to throw that out. It's the same steps. There's still a step 1 and a step 2, but your underlying data has changed. So all the work that somebody did to put in a goal in fall of 2025, you now have to do that again, and you have to do that quickly. So that's finish line number 2, and that applies to everybody regardless of what your normal DBE goal date is. At the bottom of the slide, we wanted to emphasize that you can be planning ahead for finish lines 2 and 3 while you're heading for finish line number 1. You can't submit your new goals or your program plan until you've completed the reevaluation, but you can be starting to work on it. And one of the things that we have in our toolbox at Keen Independent is an availability survey that can be started independent of having all the reevaluation complete, because that availability survey is designed to capture potential DBEs, not just current DBEs. If you wait a long time, if you haven't planned ahead, that race to finish line number 2 will be longer than what it needs to be. So we've been urging people to be thinking ahead, and that will save you some time between finish lines 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so one of the questions is, we just want to go over this again. So when can I return to DBE contract goals? And this is very simple. That's the last thing in the race in the finish lines. I guess we could put finish line number 4, which is once you have a DBE program plan and you've determined that you need DBE contract goals to meet your overall goal, then it may be possible to restart DBE contract goals. And the reason for this, just the logic behind it, it's not only what the IFR says, but you don't know whether you will need DBE contract goals until you have an overall goal and the projection of whether you can meet that overall DBE goal solely through neutral means. That language that has always been in the DBE program has not been changed with the AFR. You still need to do that. And so if you say, well, we're going to restart DBE contract goals and then do our overall DBE goal and then do our DBE program plan, you put the cart before the horse, and your DBE contract goals may not be supportable. I don't want to practice law without a license, so I may kick this tomorrow, but you might be challenged in court if you start DBE contract goals when you don't have a basis for them, because you haven't done the overall DBE goal and the new DBE program plan. You may not be able to enforce your DBE contract goals. Mara, this is your time to save me if I said something wrong.
Yeah, I would say since we're talking about a race neutral program at the end of the day, whether you call it DBE conscious or DBE neutral under the IFR, that the challenge would be not from in a court of law, but a regulatory compliance issue, which of course is concerning, concerning nonetheless. So yeah, it's a new rule. My recommendation is cross the T's and dot the I's. Don't try to get ahead of yourselves, but also don't drag your feet in meeting the vaguely worded direction from the DOT.
Okay, this is exactly the same slide we've been showing you. Time is the enemy. How do you move quickly? So those that are at the beginning of the reevaluation process, the step 1 is to start. You now have lots of models of what's been successful around the country. So you're in a better position than others were to be able to start. So you should be able to start quickly. Offering assistance to the applicants is a key part of this. You'll see in the Michigan DOT case study that they made a concerted effort to get as much information to the applicants as possible, which took some time to do, but then streamlined the process because they got better applications, or applications that were more in line with the IFR, from providing that training and assistance. So they were not afraid of helping people. Although when we've talked with different certifiers around the country, that's been a conversation that we've had. There's been some fear of, well, how much help is too much help? And they were very helpful. And you'll see to the extent that they were helpful when we get into that case study. So reviewing applications as they are received, having an applicant be able to cure any defects in their application, giving them some help once you receive something, and not just flat out denying them to the point where they could not reapply until a certain amount of time has passed. So letting people know what a specific date, the guidepost for receiving the applications is, and then everybody is running the race in a state and needs to finish the race at the same time, because if you're done early with your recertifications and another certifier is not, then your reevaluation is not done. So that's you're finished the race when the slowest certifier is done. So accelerating the process, we'll say it again, start working on goals and plan now so you can finish after your reevaluation is complete. Again, that's your individual race, and you'll be making those plans. Maybe it will be beneficial to work together with other recipients because if you're in the same market area, you can be sharing some information. We certainly have done that where it's multiple recipients that are sharing, say, availability data on who's a potential DBE in their market. Now, their goals will be different because they'll have a different mix of work. And then you'll need a consultation process and be thinking about that now once the proposed goals are produced. All right. We want to get through the case study of Michigan, and I don't see the roster of everybody who's on the call today, but I hope some Michigan DOT people are on here and that we haven't completely messed up what happened. This is based on a couple of conversations, but we hope we got it right, but there's no guarantees, and that hopefully somebody can correct anything that we say is wrong. So they didn't have any early information on the IFR. They knew it on October 3rd, just like everybody else. But they had a fast start. And the reason they are past the 3 finish lines, their fast start was a big part of this. So they started accepting applications. Our notes are November 3rd of last year. They initially gave 45 days, which is a pretty fast process for receiving applications, especially since they did a lot of training, a lot of webinars to train people on how to do personal narratives. They ended up extending that window into early 2026, or at least by the end of the year. They individually reached out to some of the DBEs to encourage applications. So they didn't just wait for people to find out about this. They directly contacted them and had a priority list to be able to do that. Their classes, they had multiple classes on how to complete personal narratives. They are the only certification, or the UCP, I guess it was MDOT, was the only agency that we know of that paid a reimbursement to DBEs if they got consultants to help. In our first webinar, this is something that we recommended based on our research, our pilot program in Arizona, which we just did for free for those DBEs. We thought that there were barriers, especially for the DBEs that probably need the DBE program the most, and were the least well set up to craft a personal narrative, that they needed that help. And so Michigan DOT did that. And the combination of the training to help people do that themselves and the offer of assistance were important in getting quality applications in, and a relatively large number of applications from firms that were very active in Michigan DOT work as DBEs. They had the drop off, I think, that everybody else is experiencing for the DBEs that have not been successful or that successful in getting transportation contracts. So they, just like everybody else, reviewed applications that they received. They did communicate with the DBEs to help them where the applications were not complete or sufficiently clear. In our discussions with them, they reminded us of something that you knock your fist into your head and say, yeah, of course. The IFR is very clear that you do not have to have a check mark on each one of the categories of potential disadvantage. So disadvantages in getting education, disadvantages in your work history, or getting jobs and advancing in those jobs, disadvantages in starting and operating your business, including access to capital. What if you only adequately covered one of those? Michigan DOT reminded us that that was sufficient under the IFR. And if the other two were lacking, you could still certify or recertify somebody as a DBE. There were 2 other certifiers in the Michigan UCP. I think Michigan DOT was a little bit ahead but there was coordination. Every agency was done with the reevaluation pretty much the same time. We think this is about February, and immediately submitted the notice of reevaluation to USDOT. So I'll get through this, and hopefully the Michigan DOT people can rehabilitate my slides. All right, so that's finish line number 1. What about finish lines number 2 and 3? So Michigan DOT, at that point, after everybody in Michigan, the certifiers, Wayne County, Detroit, Michigan DOT, have crossed the finish line for reevaluation, Michigan DOT starts its own race towards the overall DBE goals and DBE program plan. So they had developed an overall DBE goal for FHWA funded contracts of 5.5%. That was down from their previous goal of 8.3% due to the number of DBEs that just didn't participate in the recertification process. Now, an important note is once somebody applied in Michigan DOT and the other certifiers in Michigan made a big effort to try to get people to apply. Once people applied, they were very successful in successfully completing those certifications. So my understanding is the number of DBEs that were denied based on their personal narrative, at least for Michigan DOT, might be 0. That they were able to work with those firms and get a successful application. So the goal went down. They did examine potential DBEs in getting to the 5.5%, or it would have been 2% or something like that. It would have been really, really low. Our concern at Keene Independent from the beginning was that the goals are going to be so low coming out of this process that it's hardly, what is the program even accomplishing? And we have some comments about how should you really think about that once we're done with the Michigan case study. But they saw this issue too, and they did include potential DBEs. We might have done that differently than what they did, but the fact that they did look at potential DBEs, we think is a good thing. Of course, they discussed this with stakeholders because that's a requirement. And they used the new overall goals in their DBE program plans. And they had FHWA, FTA, and FAA plans and goals. They submitted them. They got a goal as acknowledged from FHWA. They also submitted the new DBE program plans, and they did this, and my understanding is step by step. You have a goal, then you do your program plan. In their FHWA goal, in their projections, they determined that they needed DBE contract goals, use of that tool to be able to meet their overall DBE goal. So we understand that I think the word is approved, but if that's not quite the right word from FHWA, after some back and forth, the FHWA has approved it. So this appears to me to be all the way through each finish line, and Michigan DOT is now setting DBE contract goals because that was part of what they determined that they needed to do in their DBE program plan to meet their overall DBE goal. So that's what this says. By the way, they started setting SBE contract goals back in the fall. So they were operating a contract goals program, but it was an SBE contract goals program since that time. So that helped perhaps kind of span the gap between October and April, the end of April, when they started setting DBE contract goals again. Okay, we're going to finish up, and then we want to open this up to discussion. Recommendations for setting overall DBE goals. First of all, include potential DBEs in the analysis of the base figure. So why? Well, that's always been in the regs, in the guidance, and it didn't change with the IFR of taking a look at potential DBEs. Potential DBEs are firms that could be certified as DBEs but aren't. And I think that's going to be critical to having goals that have any kind of connection to reality. A 2% goal for, say, a state of Michigan, which they did not set only because they had considered potential DBEs, a 2% goal just doesn't pass the sniff test in a state like Michigan. So here's another view of this. So if you think about the firms that are eligible for DBE certification under the IFR compared to who was eligible before, or in kind of in practical terms, who was applying for it before. There are more socially and economically disadvantaged firms in the United States and in each state than there are small minority women-owned firms. So, we completed a large study for the state of Minnesota, including Minnesota DOT and other entities operating the federal DBE program. In that study, and this is all public information, I think we have a link on our website, the Keenan Independent website, we examined groups that could be socially and economically disadvantaged that were not in the state's targeted group business program. And that included LGBTQ owned firms. It included firms with a disability, firm owners with a disability. Could be service disabled veteran owned firms. We found that Middle Eastern and North African owned firms were facing disadvantage in Minnesota, and recommended that those be allowed to participate in their state program for state and local dollars, and be reviewed on an individual basis. So all of the minority and women-owned firms might still be socially and economically disadvantaged, or a large share might be, plus these other groups that were being added that were perhaps not owners of color or women, but were gay men, MENA, American-owned firms, white male business owners with a disability, maybe they are service-disabled vets. All of those would be an expansion to those firms that would be able to participate in the state's program. And we're continuing to work with them now on trying to, over time, make that happen. But the math is your groups grew. So your overall goal of DBEs should be larger as a share of your total market, not smaller under the IFR. And I say this is a kind of a practical difference because you could have a white male-owned firm, and occasionally did apply under this individual certification door in the old DBE program. But now it's explicit. It's about social and economic disadvantage. In our review, we've been helping some firms with personal narratives and help, and in discussions with certifiers as well about how they are doing this and thinking about it. The types of disadvantages being brought up apply to many people beyond minority women-owned firms, and the groups just is a bigger group. Your goal should not go down. If anything, your goal should go up. So that's all in the step one, the base figure. Thank you for listening to my rant about this, but we feel strongly that there's the correct way to think about this is not a small group of firms. You should resist the assumption that your goal should go down. There is no reason it should go down. Okay, potential step two in the base figure analysis anyway. Potential step two adjustments. These are all the same. The only language that was changed is if you rely on a disparity study, make sure that it's one that includes capacity. Of course, key independent studies do include capacity, but all of these steps, all of these considerations in the step two adjustments, you still need to go through. You just need to go through them in a different way. So we've developed a methodology of how you look at, say, information related to employment, self-employment, education, training for socially and economically disadvantaged people, not necessarily limited to people of color or women. That's still a factor. You can still adjust your goal based on that factor. When you look at current capacity, kind of your past DBE participation, that needs to be calculated based on who's now certified as a DBE. That's our reading of actually how to do that. And that will be an important factor to say, almost backcasting, what would have our DBE participation been if we'd had the IFR in place, and only those DBEs that made it through the recertification process would be able to be counted. And the third bullet is looking at financing, bonding, and insurance, not just for minority and women-owned firms, but socially and economically disadvantaged people overall, and any other relevant data. That is still the law of the land. That's in the regulations. There was an addition because of the looking at disparity studies with capacity and some word changes. But these 4 bullets still are in the regs just like they were prior to October 3rd. Okay. Why do you want to include potential DBEs? We have just told you. And those potential DBEs are those that might meet the qualifications but are not certified at this time. So all this is recognized. It did not change with the IFR. This is still acceptable. Michigan DOT had went down this path and has not heard back that it's wrong. So how do you do this? You need if you have a disparity study done in your area, and I know a lot of people on this call probably aren't in states where there would be a relevant disparity study. Um, uh, but if you have one, the availability data is there, and you need a supplemental piece of information. So what we've proposed to do is go back and talk to the same firms, including the white male-owned firms, and ask them if they are a potential DBE. We have a way of doing that that gets good information out of it. You might need a new availability survey to identify potential DBEs if one isn't recent in your area. Again, we call people and we ask them, and we think this is a defensible way of determining who is and who is not a potential DBE based on our conversations with them, whether they would qualify for the program and would be interested in the program. And our methodology for that has been reviewed and accepted prior to the October 3rd change. We have been including potential DBEs for the last, almost 20 years as we've been helping entities set overall DBE goals. And in some ways, the conversations with those potential DBEs is almost identical to what we now need to do under the IFR. Quick note on SBE programs, really good idea to have them. We have been helping state try to figure out if you're going to have an SBE program and you do not want to use the SBA size standards to go up to, say, a $45 million annual revenue contractor in your program, how do you have a way of setting a different size standard that makes sense for your entity? And what we have done is looked at their past contracts and almost done a disparity study based on business size. So what's the utilization of those small businesses of different definitions? What's the availability of those firms to do that type of work? And what's the bid capacity of those firms? So for those sizes of contracts, and where do you find underutilization? And for this particular entity, we found that it's firms with annual receipts less than $1 million and those with annual receipts between 1 million and 5 million. But beyond 5 million, those firms were not underutilized in that entity's contracts, given the size and types of work that they had, and including subcontracting as well. So they have a defensible way of setting a size limit for their emerging small business program or micro business program, whatever you want to call it, of 5 million. And we did this by industry. So just let you know that there is a way to get to a size standard that makes sense, that is defensible if somebody is denied certification and they were to challenge that, that based on their size, if they were above X million dollars. This is the type of analysis that we think would be important, not only to explain the program, but also defend it if somebody was upset that they were not successfully certified. We've covered a lot of material. Thanks, Mara, for explaining things. Thank you all for listening to my personal perspectives on some of these aspects. And we're ready to start the Q&A. I'm going to hand it back to Nikki.
Okay, fantastic. I see we've got a lot of comments here that I will get through. Do we want to take comments via the raised hand feature and allow folks to chat with us?
Sure, that would be fine.
Okay, great. So I've got a couple of raised hands here, so you can use that. There's that function at the very bottom that says raised hands. You can use that as well. So there's a couple folks. I'm gonna get to Crystal and Jessica right quick, and then we'll start reading out some of these in the Q&A, and then yep, keep sending them in or raise your hand, and I will unmute you so you can speak. So let's do first off. Okay, Crystal. Okay. This maybe is not Crystal, are you would you like to give your comment?
And I'm seeing Crystal is still muted.
Right, yes. I think you're able to unmute. Able to unmute. Okay. While we're figuring that, I'm gonna kick this over to Jessica. Let's see. Let's allow Jessica. There we go. Jessica, you're able to unmute if you'd like to give your comment. All right. Maybe we don't do this because I think we're maybe having some folks are having trouble unmuting or giving comments. But let's go. Let me get over to the Q&A portion here and read out some of these questions and comments. So we have one saying, if you are not setting individual contract goals, DBE neutral program, how does that fit into your timeline?
A quick answer to that. Technically, you won't know. So say you've not set DBE contract goals in the past. You won't know whether you will need DBE contract goals in the future and continue to just operate a neutral program until you are done with the reevaluation, you've calculated the new overall DBE goals, and you've done the projection of how much you can meet in that overall DBE goal through neutral and through race and gender conscious. Say it's a 5% goal, and you say we can meet 5 percentage points of that goal through neutral means. That doesn't, you then have 0 for the DBE conscious, because the way the math works. And you say we don't need DBE contract goals. You still need to do that on the same timeline as everybody else. So that the timeline in the AFR, it did not say you need to do all these steps as quickly as practicable if you want DBE contract goals. It just said you need to do these steps as quickly as practicable for everyone getting USDOT funds. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question is triennial goals cannot be updated until UCP reevaluations are complete. Do you know if DBE program plans surrounding the goal are still required to be updated and submitted on the normal triennial deadline?
So that goes to the question of there is this normal pace to this. Mara and I spoke about what if you just did your goal, but we didn't address what if your goal deadline is coming up but you're not ready for it. You just don't, you're not done with a reevaluation. It would not seem to me that you can meet the deadline, and you would have to ask for an extension, which I know entities have done in the past. When they have not been able to meet their normal triennial deadline, they've contacted their mode and requested an extension, and in many cases, those extensions have been given. Mara, do you have a different answer than that?
Nope, I think that's correct. That if you're on any requirement, frankly, if there's a deadline, you haven't had a chance to do it, you're engaging in due diligence to meet whatever requirement it is, and you're stuck with addressing it, then absolutely you contact the DOT, the operating uh, department within DOT for an extension in writing.
Thank you, Dave and Mara. Okay, next we have what percentage of returning DBEs will not be recertified?
So my reading of that is you had a DBE pool on October 3rd. You're just at your point of reevaluation, what share of those DBEs are still certified? So we have heard different percentages over the last few months. I really want to toss this out to the group if you have good answers to this. Um, what Michigan DOT told us is that among the pool of DBEs that were active in Michigan DOT work, 80% of them that had been involved, 80% of them were recertified, and 20% did not. I think it's that did not participate. It's not that they were denied certification; it's they chose not to reapply. That still leaves all of those firms that had not gotten much work in the past, or maybe didn't get any work in the past. Perhaps they were getting DBE certification for other reasons. And I think Michigan DOT, hopefully I'm not speaking incorrectly, I think that's where a lot of the drop off occurred. And that's probably, based on my understanding, talking with other states, that's where they sing it as well. But if anybody has a better percentage than what I just described, because I only gave you kind of part of the answer, their total numbers. See if I have it here. Their total numbers really reduced, and I think they got 140 personal narratives out of 600 DBEs. So you can do the math there. That's um, a quarter. Um, and that would be consistent with what we're hearing from other states.
Thanks, Dave. Is there a standard template that's submitted to USDOT to inform them of completion?
I think we saw the email exchanges between Michigan and USDOT, and it looked the answer would be no. It's you need to tell them that what you have done to comply with the IFR using the language in the IFR, and in that we don't know if that's sufficient or not, but it was at least acknowledged by USDOT. The email was acknowledged.
Thank you. We also had a comment that was related to the prior comment about percentage of DBEs that would not be recertified. It says we're at about 1/3. So just FYI there. Okay, next. What percentage of DBE and ACDBEs first applied for reevaluation in Michigan?
So I think the percentage that we've been talking about um, are those that are correct because very few or maybe zero were denied. So if it's a quarter, if it's a third, that's about the number that applied for reevaluation.
Great. And let's see, what was the percentage related? What was the percentage decrease in DBE firms in the Michigan UCP directory?
about 2/3 to 3/4. So the current directory is about a quarter, about a third of the size that it was before.
Yep. Did Michigan continue to work with the firms before rejecting their personal narratives?
Again, hopefully somebody's from Michigan is on the call today. My understanding is yes, that it was helping people with their personal narratives, still being appropriate and having a arm's length relationship, but they didn't just reject them. If there was an ability, I've heard other people say this, I don't know that the Michigan folks would have put it this way, but to cure the application before rejection and really try to work with them on understanding what the IFR was about. I think that's many certifiers that we've been talking with said when you get and we've done this ourselves. We've worked with DBEs that were actually going to be denied, and we've seen what they submitted, and then we help them kind of educate them on, okay, what is the story that you need to describe here? What does the IFR ask for? In some cases, we saw either promotion of their firm or describing how important the DBE program is to them or is in general, and really kind of missing the point of what the personal narrative ought to be. But they were able to do the personal narrative once they were, kind of better educated and say, okay, well, that's everything you've said is true, but that's not what the personal narrative, that's not the role of the personal narrative. Don't advertise yourself. Don't rant about how unfair this is, or don't, say how great the DBE program is. All of that could be true, but that's not the personal narrative. Here's what's in the personal narrative. Just respond to the points in the AFR. And we think that's turned out to be very successful for them. So I don't know if that resonates with other certifiers in the meeting today.
Thank you. Yes, we also had another respondent that said there was a 31% response rate here at my agency. We went from over 500 to about 160. Okay. Has MDOT published their goals and DBE program plan on their website?
We think their goals are public. They have not published their goal methodology document or their DBE. I don't think they published their DBE program plan.
Thank you. And how much harder will it be now to see if firms may be DBE eligible or potential DBEs now that race and gender are not a factor?
So it was hard. It was a bit hard before, and it's no harder now, which is hopefully a helpful response to this question. In some states, uh, it was a more rigorous or a more lengthy interview of the firm about here's what the DBE program is. We're going to ask you two questions and we'll have a discussion with you, but we want to know whether you think you would qualify for this and do you think you'd actually apply for it? And so that's what we were doing before when we were having these individual discussions where we kind of drilled down to those that looked like they could be DBEs. And that's what we have. We've already tested this in Alaska because um, kind of a long story there, but we were well along with our disparity study in Alaska, or we were, the timing of that study is after the IFR came out, we had not started our availability survey, and we were able to add that to our availability survey and get into those discussions with firms. And so we actually know what the response is for different groups of firms to that series of questions about whether they're a potential DBE. It hangs together, makes sense to us based on that testing. We don't think Alaska's any different overall than other states. And that's the methodology that we are ready to do elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. We had another comment that just has a link there that says, I believe the Michigan goal methodologies in their DBE program plan. So thank you for sharing that link. Great. Okay. According to DBE America meeting, Michigan is already setting DBE participation goals on federally funded projects.
That is correct, and
Yep.
that's brand new. That's been a week or maybe two that they've been doing that.
Okay. Do you think the goal will be reduced if you only receive applications for a subset of the DBEs who were originally certified?
Yes,
Mhm.
unless you look at potential DBEs.
And how can you determine if a potential DBE has experienced past discrimination?
Uh, when you go through how it how they would qualify for the program, we explain what is necessary to qualify. So we don't actually interview them about whether they've experienced past discrimination, in getting into the details. We interview them about um, this would be the application process. You would need to, in a personal narrative, show that you've experienced that you're socially and economically disadvantaged. And if they say yes, I would qualify, and yes, I want to or would be willing to do this, then we would count them as a potential DBE. And that again has been consistent with what we've done in the past where it has been accepted, where we don't know when we've had the conversations pre-October 3rd with potential DBEs whether they would be, actually follow through on certification or not, or make it through the process. But it still was acceptable to count them as a potential DBE. And the guidance on this from USDOT in the past uh, has, my recollection of that guidance has been that you don't need to get much deeper than that. You don't actually have to start this, going through a certification types of questions with them to be able to count them as a potential DBE, even though we're able to screen out a number of firms based on having that conversation that appear to qualify, but then when we talk to them, we are not going to count them.
Related question, as a TVM, is it within our scope to be finding and asking potential DBEs these questions and pushing them to try to obtain certification?
Um, I think so. Mara, what would
Yeah.
be your take on that?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of expertise in the TVM field, but I would agree. I think so.
Yeah. How many questions are on your availability survey? Do you email, call, and mail the survey?
Lots and yes. And the calling is a big part of the survey. That's where we get a lot of the response because we're persistent. If somebody doesn't answer the phone, then we keep calling them and get a hold of somebody.
Yeah. Do you have any rough ideas of what kind of response rates most jurisdictions are getting to the reevaluation process? If response rates are low after the finish line one UCP reevaluation complete phase, should that change anything about an agency or state's approach?
So there's two parts of this question. I think we've answered the first part of
Mhm.
what jurisdictions are getting. The second part is, I think, the reason the guidepost date, and I'm trying not to say deadline, the guidepost date has moved back for many entities, including Michigan UCP, is they were looking at how many responses they got and they said, hey, we have to try to do better than this. And so they gave people more time. Um, and then relaunched an effort to try to get even more applications. So yes, I think you're always as you approach finish line one, maybe not when you're at it, but when you're approaching it, you probably need to consider whether you need to add more time to that. Oh, and more efforts because just adding more time may not make any difference, but more outreach and education efforts.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, Can you talk a little bit more about the personal narrative requirements, specifically about the fact that folks don't need to meet all of them, education, social disadvantage, etc.?
Mara, do you want to take that one?
Yes, and I have some guidance, so if people are interested, I can certainly send it out because we've been working, my firm and my colleagues have been working with DBEs or potential DBEs on the personal narrative. And the bottom line is you need to demonstrate in a concise is what I would recommend, but at the same way, complete disadvantage that you have faced in your life. And while the IFR suggests that there are these categories, which are good guideposts, if you will, in terms of how you focus your thoughts, it expressly says you don't need to identify disadvantage in each and every category. And I would add that the categories that are in the IFR are illustrative of the categories that you can address regarding social disadvantages you face in the past. So basically it's not limited to, it's not required that it be each of these categories, but it's also not required that it be only these categories. So you have to think about it very broadly. So what I've seen in a variety of personal narratives that my firm has handled in April, because in California, this suggested guidepost was April 16th, so there was a flurry of activity with folks, and some folks addressed just one incident that might have started early in their life that had what I call a through line from the past to their experience as a business person to the present. Others focused on their experience as a business individual and the challenges they faced during just launching their firm and seeking opportunities, access to capital, being treated equally vis-a-vis their competitors. Others that one in particular that went, maybe 4 or 5 pages or more. That's why I say concise but comprehensive is important. Was able to do, if you will, chapter and verse on each of the categories. So there isn't a template. Some of these, like I said, were 2 pages, some of them were 15 pages, but really the focus is less on the length, but the content. And again, not being bound by, don't feel like you have to, or a DBE needs to identify a disadvantage, a social disadvantage or economic disadvantage in each of the categories.
Thank you. And related, let's see, where is that? There was a comment about, there it is. Is this really now a DBE neutral program since race and gender are no longer taken into consideration?
I'll give you the short answer. Mark can give you the longer answer. This is a program about social and economic disadvantage, and that is, it somewhat changes the definition of DBE, but maybe not that much. The big change is it's not a group remedy. It's a remedy available on an individual basis. So I don't know, Mara, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, well, the important part, of course, is that the program is no longer um, focused on uh, race and gender of the business owners. It doesn't exclude, obviously, basically, it's race neutral, obviously, but members of people of color, members of what we refer to as minority groups in the United States that have faced a social disadvantage and an economic disadvantage certainly can continue to apply as who has faced those disadvantages. Yep. But it is race neutral, but race is not irrelevant, I guess is the point that I'm making.
And here's a good point, Mara, where if people are not aware of what happened with Mid-American Milling, you could quickly tell them.
Yes, so the folks have been following the Kentucky case in the federal district court. The most recent ruling out of the court is there was a preliminary injunction that had been issued by the judge. We don't have, if people want to know the more specifics, I can tell them, but the bottom line is that there was a motion to and a court ruling that by the intervening DBEs, defendants had entered the case, that the court vacate or dissolve the preliminary injunction, and the court did dissolve the preliminary injunction, which essentially means the ruling of the court is essentially off the books. The court concluded the case was moot in light of the government's IFR.
And this is important for a couple of reasons. And this is positive for the DBE program. This is important for a couple of reasons. Just this week, I was in a meeting where somebody was citing the early rulings in that case is a reason for not having these types of programs. And I'm, as Mara is very aware, I'm not afraid of practicing law without a license, but I try to, stay on the right side of that line. And I was able to say that is moot. The early rulings do not exist anymore. And you should not be throwing that around. No one should be throwing that around as disparaging the DBE program and in any way saying, well, this is, you don't need to do this program anymore, or this program has a short life, or it's going to lose in court. It's as if the case never existed, correct?
Yes, and thank you for that reminder. The net effect of it is when that case, which is the anchor, in my opinion, when you look at this IFR, I think that's the anchor that the government leveraged to adopt the IFR and change the DBE program as we know it. The case itself, when it's vacated or dissolved, it wasn't vacated, it's a technicality, it's dissolved, it's off the books. What else is on the books? And there are at least 4 circuits, courts of appeal, a higher court than this particular judge's ruling, that have upheld the constitutionality of the race and gender conscious DBE program with the rebuttable presumption. So the state of the law is that the program is constitutional in at least 4 circuits.
The old program is
The
constitutional.
old program, yes. I'm talking about the original DBE program, yes.
Okay, back
Thank
to
you.
our questions, because we had an interesting little
Yeah, sidebar there.
Yes. Yes, wasn't
but
interesting.
just
It's complicated.
if somebody
complicated.
throws Mid-America Milling at you in an aggressive way, say, what? What are you talking about? I've never heard of that case. It doesn't exist, and you're technically correct.
Any longer. You got to use the word any longer. Does not
Okay.
any longer.
Related question, which states found the old program to be constitutional?
Oh, there we go. Which states? Well, it's actually the circuits. So the 9th Circuit, the 10th Circuit, the 8th Circuit, and the 7th Circuit is my recollection off the top of my head. The 9th Circuit.
Go to any keen independent report, and
Yes.
we'll show you the map
Yes.
where the circuits are.
Okay. What are options for a certifying agency that completes reevaluations if other certifiers in the state UCP have not started? Can individual certifying agencies notify USDOT in order to restart the program for that agency?
So if this is not the Florida question, I'm going to give you my answer, and I'll hand it to Mara. I think you need to wait unless you can cover all the DBEs in the state somehow. But the answer to the Florida question would be you have one certifier who's not playing, and the remaining certifying agencies have covered all the DBEs. I think the answer might be different then, that every DBE, the important thing is every DBE in the state needs the opportunity to get recertified. If you can say yes to that question, then it seems to me that the UCP can notify USDOT. Mara, did I get that right?
I'm sorry, because I was still focused on the circuit and the states. Can you repeat that question?
Okay. We'll put the map up.
It's like when
Okay.
you know something and you're like, wait a minute, why don't I know?
Okay.
Okay, so,
State X. We have one entity. Say it's
right,
the state DOT, and
right.
they're just not playing.
That's right.
They have another plan for this. They've applied for a waiver for the from the DBE program and say, we think this is still too woke and we don't want to do it. So we just don't want to do it, and we're not going to do it. So you're still in that state, you're still a certifier or you're a recipient. What do you do? And I don't think this is a hypothetical.
Right.
So it may be that the other certifiers in that state can pick up the slack, certify everybody that would have been certified anyway, if everybody would have, played nice among the certification agencies. And then to make sure that you are compliant as a UCP, because you're a member of that UCP, you don't have a dominant member. This is a group. This UCP then informs USDOT that your reevaluation is complete. That would be my argument or
Yes,
how
and I would
personal.
say we've had this question before. This question is, the same answer that I would give, which is that there is no opting out. Again, if I've not seen anything from the DOT that says even on the prior program, which someone says, well, we don't want to do this, can we just opt out? The answer is no. And so even in the IFR, the answer would still be no unless this administration changes what is historically the practice. But you're right. If you've got the one UCP entity and they're you know, just not playing along, if you will, there may be ways of within the state to push that compliance, if you will, politically, I guess, is one way. But at the end of the day, everyone who has a role that is subject to this program, that has accepted the conditions of this program, um, has to comply. So I agree with you that you have to do your own due diligence. I would recommend, I mean, obviously I don't represent anyone here that's in that situation but my reaction would be is that to the extent that the folks that are in the state that need to move forward with this and they're getting pushback at the state level, that those local certifiers do what they need to do and present it to the DOT.
And I think that would be through the UCP,
Yeah,
would be ideal if it's still through the UCP that says our reevaluation is complete.
yeah, I agree.
We had a couple of related comments that you kind of answered these questions here, but I'll just read them just so we have that. But so in Florida, several of the UCPs are in some stage of reevaluations. However, as you mentioned, the Florida DOT has not participated in the process. How do we report completing to USDOT if FDOT is not participating?
I think that would be the same
Yep.
answer that we just gave.
Yes. And then there was another related question, I think same answer. So some agencies are wanting to wait to see if more DBEs get certified. What are your thoughts? Okay. Let's see. Do you see that the IFR states that USDOT has to approve your plan before restarting the program?
So in our pre-meeting, we talked about this. What's our answer? What's our official answer, Maura? We don't know. You might run a risk if you just go ahead. The issue is you are not going to hear anything, and I think Michigan is in this situation with at least one of its modes. Is you just don't hear anything at all. So you've submitted your plan and crickets. So then what do you do? And it may be that different states are making different decisions about what they do. Some are going ahead. That is probably not without risk. Is that
Well,
is
I'm an
that close
attorney,
enough?
okay? And I was, as you mentioned, in my qualifications, Nicole, that I was the former general counsel of SFO. I was a longtime deputy city attorney in San Francisco. Um, in my career and looking at the IFR, you need the approval of DOT and as a matter of regulatory compliance. Um, So that's the lawyer speaking. I'm not going to comment on what other options there may be, but does anybody have any experience where the DOT is essentially just sitting forever on these things? It feels like it's a little too early to predict that they will not respond promptly.
I think the not responding promptly is a good expectation because they've not responded. Uh, many entities, recipients have been trying to get answers and not getting any answers. So don't wait on the answers. Um, so the thing that I would take a look at is what has been the practice in the past. So we know that all of the modes, to a different extent, have been slow to respond once you get a new goal submitted to them or a new DBE program plan. And so I would take a look at, for your particular entity, when that has happened in the past, what have you done? As a consideration for how you might proceed. Although I'm giving you probably much more of a green light than Mara would on this.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
And it's a, um, are you're trying to comply with this? You need a partner in the USDOT to comply. You don't want to be out of compliance. So lots of different things to consider. I know that my understanding is Michigan has proceeded with all three modes, but I'm not quite sure on that. That may be a more nuanced answer of how Michigan came down on this because they were right up against this. This was a very real situation for them. It was very difficult for them, or they expressed to us that getting the understanding of what the DBE programs plans were and it's about the plan. My understanding is the goal that somebody could go back and say, we don't like your goal to Michigan a year from now. And then they would have that conversation. But the plan, which had the goal in it, actually was approved by FHWA. Okay, Nikki, let's wrap this
Yes.
up.
Yes, couple of quick comments that were somewhat related to this discussion. There was a section of the IFR that states effective October 3rd, 2025, you are not required to update your overall goals until UCP completes the reevaluation process.
That's really
And
helpful in our you might still be polite and have it in writing that you've notified them that you're missing your deadline because of that, and then cite the AFR. That's great.
yes. And then another that said in the state of Florida, Florida DOT has requested a waiver not to abide by the IFR. They are asking to move forward with their SBE program. The other 8 UCP members do not have access to the entire database because FDOT has shut the directory down. We can only reevaluate those firms we originally certified. FDOT has over 1,600 firms that they're responsible for.
Call Mara.
Okay. A couple of questions here. As projects are going out to bid or RFP, if an agency has not yet submitted their updated program plan or triennial goals, can you still mention the DBE program requirements in the solicitation and just not have any goals on the project?
Yes.
Your answer is yes, Mara?
Yes, I mean you have to reference, I mean the really the devil in the detail is how you reference it. But yeah, if it's subject to the Part 26 and or Part 23, yeah, you do mention it.
Thank you. Related, what are airports doing with new RFPs in terms of goals?
Mara, what's been your experience?
Yeah, I mean I haven't seen too many uh, up and down the state, but typically the agencies in California, uh, most of them have SBE programs, so they're all implementing their SBE programs, from what I can tell. SFO, as an example, and I believe LAX, uh, identify the ACDBE program and the SBE element of that program in their RFPs, but they're not setting goals. They're using, some of them are using what I call encouraging language, just inviting participation, but focusing on language that is related to small business participation.
Thank you. We are seeing close to 75% of our UCP directory has not submitted anything. How much effort do we go through before we deny or decertify them?
So you're getting about what other people are getting. So you know that. To get more than that, you need to do more, and it's not just giving them more time. You probably need to figure out a program to be able to help them. We have proposed to certifiers to either it's us or it's Mara or somebody like us to actually fund the outside assistance that they need to be able to produce the personal narratives. And that would be, you can do that quickly and it moves it along. That would capture, we think, it might even double the number. But the response to the IFR without any help is actually about what we expected from our pilot, 6 months ago. So we're getting what we expected. It's because this is very foreign to people. They don't really know how to approach this, and it seems insurmountable and maybe not worth it. So don't give more time just to do the same thing. Give more time and then do something else. So Michigan did its own training, and then it was reimbursing people that went out and got outside assistance.
All right. So we are getting close to our time here. If it's all right to spend a few more minutes just responding to a few of these last questions in here, I think we can do that. Okay. A couple of related comments though. Everyone in this business has been operating an approved DBE and ACDBE program for many years. If we complete the reevaluations and notified USDOT and we recalculate our new annual goals, I will assume to proceed as instructed in the past, i.e., don't wait for your mode to approve your annual goals before implementing them. And another comment said our UCP received direction from FAA official to proceed with project goals after submitting our triennial goals and programs. They suggested that the federal agencies may review and may not necessarily approve. Okay. Let's see. How are states handling the firms that did not get recertified protections? Can a prime remove a DBE and not honor the contract after finding out they're not moving forward with recertification?
Mara?
I think it's more I think it's a case by case situation. It's not a one size fits all. There's my experience, at least in California, there are contractual provisions beyond the regulatory compliance provisions in the contracts. I think the tendency is not to permit a prime contractor in a construction job, as an example, to just eliminate the DBE or substitute it without good cause. I think those rules would still apply. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Thank you. Right. How many times were firms allowed to cure their application?
I don't have a good
Yeah.
answer to that, but my sense is maybe more than once in some states.
Mhm.
You talked about setting a lower size standard for small businesses. What about setting a higher personal net worth for concessions, small businesses in particular, given the capital and operational requirements of concessions?
Boy, at first, I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
At first blush, I would be uncomfortable with being exceeding the limits in the federal DBE program. Mara,
Mhm.
do you have any thoughts?
That's an excellent question. I haven't given it thought either, but I do think that there was, at least in the early days when the SBE element in the DBE program was proposed, the DOT at that time said the threshold or the thresholds that if they're adjusted have to be at least within the program. You can't essentially exceed them. So I would, unless it's a state-run program, obviously, there's a state or local uh, program that's being implemented for state or local funded contracts. That's different. I have to give that a little thought, though.
Thank you. And I did see a comment that was related to the prior discussion about how many times firms can cure their applications that said two for us.
Hmm.
So thank you. Okay, just a couple more. Is there a list or directory site to find and verify what businesses are currently DBE certified or recertified? Does a business get a certification number when their personal narrative is approved?
Two-part question. I don't know that uh, that we have a current site. Um, I, I don't know of any. Mara, what about the getting their certification number? Is that what your clients who do get recertified, are they getting a certification number?
Yeah, I've not had any clients yet pass the
Get through?
yeah,
Okay.
get through yet. They just submitted. All the clients I have just submitted, or they have not yet been required to submit. So no, I don't have any success stories essentially.
Okay. In setting new overall goals, can you count the previously certified firms who did not apply for reevaluation since they could potentially apply later?
Our approach is no,
Hmm.
but that's just our approach. Um, so that uh, it seems like it's more in line with the IFR to do some research on those previously certified firms because
Mhm.
it's so explicit that they be decertified. And maybe some of those are potential DBEs for the future, but I think that would be I would if you're going to do it that way, I would be very cautious about it. I don't know that there's a um, we are not doing it that way.
You. And a comment said, we use B2G and firms are listed with all certifications there. It's a nationwide system, but not every entity uses them.
That was my snarky answer is if you can get into the B2G Now portal, that's as close as you can get. Um, and there's no better database, but that is not complete.
Okay, and final question here. What changes are there to interstate DBE requests? What is the standard to ask for from another jurisdiction to ensure the DBE has been IFR reevaluated? If a firm has not yet been reevaluated and another state has completed the reevaluation or asked for interstate certification for a firm, do you still only have 10 days to complete the reevaluation and get that info to them per the IFR?
So
CFR.
I'm going to frame this a different way is if the reevaluation in another state is not complete, um, uh, well, let's see. So Mara, maybe
Yeah,
I'm
so
just going to
the
bail on
home
this
state
and leave
has to
this to
do
you.
its job first before the interstate uh, certification happens. Um, I mean, I don't know. I mean, in my own experience, we've completed our my firm is certified as a DBE in California, but we're also certified in Arizona. We've submitted what we needed to Arizona, but we haven't heard anything because Arizona is obviously going through its process. So this is it's an excellent question. I mean, all of these are excellent questions. I just don't know enough about the new set of rules for the interstate certification to really give a view here or an opinion, but I'll take it.
But the bottom line is in Arizona, say you didn't apply for recertification in California, and you applied in Arizona and that's not your home state, they shouldn't be certifying. They shouldn't be
Right,
going through that process.
right,
And that's the way I read this question. And I think you have to wait until the home state has gone through their
right.
process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
All
agree.
right. Thank you. And last question is, will there be more sessions like this as things progress?
Well, that was one of my
Mhm.
questions to the group. Should we
Right.
have
Good
more
question.
sessions?
Hmm.
If anybody's still on.
And we have a
Okay,
yes. So
good.
all capitals. Yes, we should. Yes, several yeses. So yes, we should. Okay, great. Well, then more sessions you shall have.
Anybody from Michigan on that's left? Did I say anything wrong? You want to correct?
Looks like we're good. Okay. Well, thank you all. I just want to reiterate that we are going to be posting this to YouTube. So we will follow up with an email that'll contain a link to that YouTube video so that you all have access to it.
And for the record, I am not an attorney and I'm not licensed to practice law anywhere.
Yes, that's more.
And for the record, when he's right, I affirm. In my opinion.
Savar's been very quiet. You could interpret that any way you want.
All right.
All right. Any final words of wisdom here? Thank you all again for attending. We really appreciate the questions and comments. It's been a great discussion.
Thank you all. We'll see
Thank
you
you
next
all.
time.
Yes. Lots of
All
food
right.
for thought. Thank you.
Congratulations to Missouri to crossing
Yes.
finish line 1.
Absolutely.
All right. See you all next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.